Welcome back to the TISM Report, folks. It's nice to be back. Although, under unfortunate circumstances, I have missed you all. Now, I've been still working on the FCK Maxim, I promise. My life has just gotten much more busy. I've got a lot to do, and then not a whole lot of free time, and then also trying to maintain interest and going through an entire timeline of something I went through personally myself. There's a lot of frustrating things and a lot of annoyances, and then also a lot of things that I've discovered while making sure I'm 100% right in my order of events. And I've even learned some new things that I promise I will be sharing with you in the timeline. There is much to go over, but hopefully, I'm fairly certain it'll be coming out this month, which means I'll finally be closer, about another video closer, and leaving 2 videos left in this series before I can wrap things up and talk about something else. But with that said, you might have noticed, some of you probably not, that the 50 Shades of Pedantry Doodle Tones and Nuance video disappeared just a couple of days ago. Some of you might even follow my Twitter, so you might already know. But for those of you that don't follow my Twitter and don't know, because I, being stupid, did not make a community post about it. On December 2nd, so just a couple of days ago, 9 days ago to be exact, I received a notification around 2 or 3 in the morning, if my memory serves me right, letting me know that the video was being taken down and that I was receiving a community guideline strike. Why? Well, apparently, the video went against the child safety policy, and that the video was being taken down because it had content that sexualized minors. Now, it's fairly obvious, at least to me, that someone went and reported the video for this. It got past everything prior. It even had its own transcripts and everything. So if there really was something like that, they would have noticed much more sooner. So I suspect, and I think this is the case, that someone went and reported the video for that, knowing that it would get it taken down. Because I'd like to note, for those that haven't seen the video, that it discusses Doodle Tones as roleplays, and some of those roleplays involve Doodle Tones roleplaying as a character they describe as physically 9 or 10. So whoever this was probably didn't like the fact that I was talking about it and spreading that information to a few thousand people, and decided to report the video for that. In a way, they're admitting that Doodle Tones sexualized minors, even if fictional minors. Now, the video has been re-uploaded by Grimskull up on his channel. I'll be linking it down below. And I may or may not re-upload a censored version. Again, I don't really want to have to go through the effort of having to go back and censor it when I'd rather just work on the Maxim, but I made a promise, and I need to keep that promise. Now, this is not my first time dealing with censorship and abuse of report systems on various websites to shut me up because I'm sharing inconvenient or unwanted information that puts their favorites in a not so pleasing light, to say the least. In fact, we've dealt with that a little bit this year. If you think back, someone did a privacy complaint on the behalf of Doodle Tones, and Doodle Tones had to clarify, nope, that wasn't me. And prior to that, Renmankins, who made the Google account and the FCK Leaks Twitter account, well, the Google account was immediately fucking reported, and we had to appeal that report so that we could share with you all the stuff on the Google Drive from that account. And I could keep going even further back, but I think I've made my point. There are people out there that don't want this talked about, that don't want this information shared, and they will do anything in their means to shut me or anyone else up that talks about it. Anything that they can, at least. I've dealt with this long before, and it's nothing new. So to whoever reported the video, this is specifically for you. A couple of months back, I teased the idea of producing a sort of timeline video going over Doodle's fetishism and the denial and the covering up from the slideshow community and people around it. That I would do a sort of deep dive, a TISM investigation on it and how that community lied about it, denied it, and covered it up. And even though my audience, many of them said that they liked and would very much want that, I was still sort of tossing the idea back and forth. After all, I've been working on the Maxim for a couple of months now, and that's been my priority. But you giving me this community guideline strike for sexualizing minors, a strike that won't go away for 90 days, that's motivated me. That's lit a spark, a flame. And I've decided I'll make that video. Once the Maxim is done, I'm going to make that video. Simply for the sake of you, that it's not going to work. It is a completely pointless, futile endeavor. And all it will do is motivate me to make more and inform more people. Spite is a fuel like no other. So in the meantime, folks, keep an eye out. The Maxim is on its way. Now, before I go, I'd like to raise a question that I'd say is fairly on topic, to do with the slideshow community, Doodle Tones, and in general, this inconvenient information for them. You see, I've noticed something particularly odd, and I'm sure many of you have noticed it. And I've actually raised this question 2 or 3 times now, I believe. Why is the slideshow community, the SCC, so quiet? You would think with the proudness that they have for the SCC courthouse, the calls that they did with Tippy and Keyblade, they genuinely view those calls as a positive, good thing that they totally should have done. And yet, there have been no calls from Doodle Tones and Nezzy Monster. They haven't dragged them in a call to sort of finger wag and lecture them about needing to be held accountable. It's fascinating how that works. Now, Doodle Tones has left the SCC from what we know so far. Who knows if Doodles might make a comeback? And I'm willing to bet Doodles will be welcomed with open arms, solely because of the fact that I see no conversation publicly about this. Sure, they can say, oh, well, we're talking about it privately, but that doesn't change the point here. You're not talking about it publicly and informing the majority of the audience. And you know that you're not. The question that we're asking that you all seem to be avoiding is, why are you talking about them and what they did privately, but everyone else you could plaster and scrutinize publicly? For years now, you guys were very, very public, and even private, but especially public, about your nonstop bitching about me, much of which was peddling the false accusations from the FCK and victimizing the FCK members. That's something you all have done nonstop. And what's really interesting here is, in the case of Nezzy Monster, for 4 years now, you all have avoided talking about what Nezzy did, whether it be what she did in the collab with Ponder, whether it be the false sexual harassment accusation that she continuously lied about for years and then tried to falsely present as an accident or a mistake to several audience members. You think that you would have cracked down on that and held her accountable for lying to people, but you didn't. You'd think that after your own members went and verified that she did lie in Ponder's server, claiming that there were only adults in the FCK server, and basically denied that he was showing minors pornography, even though she confronted him for that months prior and compared him to V Omega. No conversation there publicly about that either. Or how about the fact that Nezzy Monster and Doodle Tones tried to pressure one of the victims, Teddy the Draws, into coming out and siding with them publicly and clearing their names. And Teddy didn't end up doing that, only for Nezzy Monster to later call her a known liar. Which should raise the question for the SCC. Why would Nezzy want the word of a known liar clearing her name? Someone that she apparently believes to be a known liar. At least that's what she called Teddy. Unless, of course, it was out of convenience. Unless, of course, it was to use Teddy as a means of scapegoating and waving her around as, oh, look, see, this victim doesn't think I did anything wrong. But if I say that, it's a bad faith assumption. Oh, wait a second, Nezzy Monster herself flaunted the fact that supposedly none of the victims have a problem with her in a conversation with an artist on Twitter. Huh. And if we talk about Doodle Tones, the fact that Doodles lied and presented it as though I hadn't spoke to any of the victims and kept claiming that despite knowing the exact opposite of that. And then there's the whole fact that Doodle Tones, for the longest, to the SCC and to everyone else, was denying knowing about Slimmers, only to turn out to have been in Slimmers' porn chat. He was in there chatting it up, and yet there's no conversation about that publicly. Or how about the fact that Doodle Tones was investigating a group that he himself was in? And I have yet to see, at least publicly, the SCC say, hey, it's a little odd to look into your own group. You know, there's going to be a problem of bias and conflict of interest when you're trying to clear up a group that you yourself were in. And there's going to be more that comes out about that I unfortunately cannot share, as I've promised. But I assure you, just you wait. In the coming weeks, there will be more about that very fact. For a community that loves to talk about people's biased and bad faith intentions, they said absolutely nothing when it came to Doodle Tones, at least publicly. They've said nothing about Doodle Tones looking into a group that he himself was in. Very uncharacteristic of the community. And this whole excuse that I know a lot of people are going to push, that they had no idea or don't really know about all of this. Much of the information that I've gone over was in Doodle's video. Nezzy's DMs with Toasty are in Doodle's video. Doodle's denying and pushing this idea that I didn't speak to any of the victims and I was stealing their story. That's in the video. And I know that the SCC have been paying attention to Laka because they've been bitching about Laka. So it's so uncharacteristic of you all. Abnormal, even. These crickets, this silence, this lack of chit-chat. You're not yipping like the ankle biters that you usually are. I find it a little odd. And I especially find it odd because not only have you been so vocal about everyone else, even vocally wrong, such is the case with me multiple times. Not only have you all dogpiled me again and again and again in defense of these people, not only were you all behind the scenes complaining that I was talking about this. You think I'm not aware of the fact that you all were constantly complaining and calling me obsessive and saying that I was talking about Nezzy ad nauseum because you all refused to talk about it. Communities that proclaimed to want to hold people accountable and inform people stayed absolutely silent about what Nezzy Monster kept doing for years. And not just silent, but also victimizing Nezzy Monster, and then also behind the scenes complaining that I was informing people about it, that I was talking about it. And a very key instance that you all did recently, in regards to this year, was when Lyle Convoy declared that FCK Leaks was actually Renminkins, that Ren was behind the FCK Leaks account. He did not provide any evidence, not a single fucking screenshot, nothing. And yet you people, immediately, on impulse, the second you saw this, took to Twitter to make a bunch of Twitter threads to remind people and inform people that FCK Leaks was Renminkins, proclaimed that Ren was trying to come back to your community even though you insist that the SCC and the art community are entirely separate. So you've contradicted yourselves and shot yourselves in the foot there. And also showing everyone that you're a bunch of control freaks who think that you genuinely decide who can and can't be somewhere specifically, so your idea is pestering someone to the point of chasing them off. Which is fucking hilarious from the people who think that looking at Twitter accounts classifies as stalking and mean tweets classifies as harassment, but nagging someone to the point of trying to chase them off out of the community because you think you get to decide what people do online. It's fucking phenomenal. The fact that you don't even realize the sheer level of contradictions and how ridiculous it is, it's beautiful. It's fucking beautiful. And did so in order to muddy the waters and make people less likely to listen to the FCK Leaks account. So on impulse, you felt the need to inform people about what Renminkins had apparently done. Yet all of a sudden, when it comes to the FCK, when there is a galore of evidence in regards to Nezzy and Doodletones, it's fucking crickets. This isn't the first time you all have done threads like that on Ren, let alone threads in general, trying to inform or bring awareness. You did a fucking hashtag on Ren, and yet when it comes to Nezzy and Doodle's antics, there's no threads, no hashtags. When their antics are arguably much worse than any of the accusations you've thrown at Ren, let alone the fact that your stalking claim. I did a little bit of looking around and asking around in regards to the stalking claim that they like to levy at Ren. Big shock, it's because Ren was looking at public fucking Twitter accounts. They genuinely believe that's stalking. So not only are these people blowing shit out of proportion, at least in regards to that specific claim thrown at Ren, not only were they rushing immediately, spontaneously, with no proof, immediately peddling FCK Leaks was Ren, and then bringing up all of what Ren had done in the past, supposedly, as though it was somehow relevant to the FCK Leaks account. Then had the audacity to complain that Ren was talking about their personal issues on the account after they started that conversation with the threads. Then got into the call, and several SCC people were listening in on the call, of the berating that Lyo did with Ren, and listening in on this call, and heard him fucking flip-flop constantly but said absolutely nothing. And yet, there's no calls for Doodles and Nezzy, no threads for Doodles and Nezzy, no fucking hashtags for Doodle and Nezzy. It's very uncharacteristic. I wonder why. But if I say it's because you don't want to talk about it and inform people because it'll make your community look like a bunch of fucking idiots, it's a bad faith assumption. If I say it's because you don't want to admit that I was right and that you were dunking on me when I was right, and that you've been constantly coddling and lashing out at anyone that said pretty much anything negative about them, let alone me, the amount of times that you all have dogpiled me on Twitter just for talking about it, and that you've constantly ran defense for these people, maybe that's why you don't want to talk about it. But if I say that, it's a bad faith assumption. But I thought I'd like to preface that and raise that question before the Maxim comes out, because you guys are going to look like fucking idiots.